They thought she was just another quiet woman unloading groceries. They didn't know she'd spent 10 years training the toughest soldiers on earth. They didn't know the calm look on her face wasn't fear, it was discipline. It started a few weeks after we moved into the neighborhood. A quiet cul-de-sac, gated entrance, lots of manicured lawns and folks waving at each other with polite smiles but never saying much more than that. My wife and I bought the place because it backed up to woods. Peaceful, private. After years of living near bases and bouncing around duty stations, we just wanted a place to rest. We didn't tell anyone who she was. We never do. She's not flashy. No bumper stickers. No gear in the yard. Just a calm woman with early morning routines, disciplined meals, and the kind of awareness that never leaves a person, even off duty. The trouble didn't start until the HOA started sending little notes. First one was about the trash cans. Must be rolled in within 2 hours of pickup. Okay, no problem. Then they said her workout mat on the back porch was clutter visible from the street. Never mind the fact that we were tucked behind a row of trees. Then they complained about her parking in our own driveway instead of inside the garage. That one annoyed her. But she let it slide. It wasn't long before we noticed the neighborhood patrols. 2 guys in tactical vests. Not police, private security. Driving around in an old SUV with a yellow light on top and a magnetic HOA logo slapped on the door. At first, we figured they were just watching for break-ins or solicitors. Until one of them started slowing down every time my wife jogged past. One day, she told me the guy followed her half a mile down the road. Didn't say anything, just drove behind her. Close. Too close. I told her we'd file a complaint. She shook her head and said, "Let's give them a little rope." I knew that tone. Flat. Controlled. It's the voice she uses on the range with new recruits who think they know everything. Still, I didn't expect how fast things would spiral. One afternoon, I was out on a supply run, and she was home alone. She had just pulled into the driveway, bags of groceries in the trunk. She popped open the garage and started carrying stuff inside. That's when the SUV pulled up. 2 guys again. One of them got out and started walking toward her. She turned around, calm, groceries still in her hand. "Ma'am," he said, "we've had reports of suspicious activity at this residence. I'm going to need you to step away from the property." She asked, "Suspicious activity like what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked back at his partner in the SUV, then unholstered his sidearm. Not a taser. A gun. Pointed it straight at her. That was the moment things shifted. She gently set the grocery bag down. Didn't move fast, didn't raise her voice. Just said, "You sure you want to do that?" The guy didn't flinch. Probably thought she was bluffing. Just another civilian woman caught off guard. Just another easy target to push around. But he had no clue who she was. In under 2 seconds, she closed the distance, kicked the weapon from his hand, and dropped him flat with a wrist lock. No excessive force. No shouting. Just clean, practiced motion. She stood over him and said nothing. The second guy in the SUV jumped out, didn't even try to help. Just stood there frozen, probably wondering if he should run or join his buddy on the ground. She didn't touch him. Just pulled out her phone and called 911. She told the dispatcher, calmly and clearly, 2 men impersonating law enforcement just pulled a weapon on me in my driveway. One is restrained. The other is unarmed but acting erratic. I am safe and I am holding my position. She didn't even break a sweat. By the time the real deputies arrived, she was sitting on the edge of the porch, sipping from her water bottle. The man on the ground was still face down, groaning. The other guy had his hands up and was begging to talk. And that's when everything started to unravel. When the sheriff's deputies rolled in, lights flashing but no sirens, they knew something wasn't right just from the call description. Armed HOA patrol confronted a homeowner, one suspect restrained by civilian. Not the usual noise complaint. They pulled up slow, cautious. My wife was already standing again, arms crossed, calm as ever. She nodded to the lead deputy and pointed at the man on the ground. Weapons under the azalea bush. Wrist might be broken. He aimed at me in my own driveway. The deputy didn't ask if she was sure. He didn't need to. He recognized her. Not from the neighborhood, but from somewhere else. Maybe a training seminar. Maybe a federal task force coordination. Doesn't really matter. His face changed as soon as he asked for ID and she handed him her Navy credentials. You could tell in a second that everything had just flipped. The restrained guy on the ground tried to sit up, whining about how it was all standard HOA security protocol. Said he was authorized to investigate suspicious residents. The second man, the one who hadn't even drawn a weapon but still stood there like a kicked puppy, started mumbling excuses. One of the deputies pulled him aside. The other knelt next to the guy on the ground, cuffed him, and called for medical backup. My wife stood off to the side, letting them handle it. She didn't need to explain herself. The footage from our home security cameras would do that just fine. But she answered every question anyway. No emotion. Just facts. That's how she works. Trained to deal with chaos by staying 3 steps ahead of it. Meanwhile, I was on my way back from the feed store when I got the call. The moment I heard the deputy say, "There's been an incident involving your wife," I almost dropped the phone. But he quickly added, "She's fine. Completely fine. Actually, she handled it." When I pulled into the neighborhood, it was already lined with squad cars and curious neighbors peeking out from their blinds like prairie dogs. Nobody dared to step outside. They just watched, probably trying to figure out how the woman who waved politely on her morning jog just disarmed a grown man and took control of the situation before the cops even showed up. I parked, got out, and the deputy waved me over. He filled me in, though honestly, I wasn't surprised. This wasn't the first time my wife had been in a high-pressure moment. Just the first time it happened outside of a training compound or battlefield. I looked over at her, and she gave me that small nod she always gives when everything's handled. The part that stunned me wasn't how calm she was. It was how unprepared those 2 HOA patrol officers were. Turns out, they weren't licensed security at all. Just 2 guys hired by the HOA president, off the books, through some buddies' private neighborhood watch program. No badges. No background checks. No firearms training. No permits. Just a couple of power-hungry volunteers playing pretend with real weapons. That's when it hit me, they really thought they could get away with it. They weren't expecting resistance. They weren't expecting consequences. They certainly weren't expecting to pull a weapon on a Navy SEAL instructor. And that's the thing about my wife. She never leads with her resume. She doesn't puff her chest or throw titles around. She lets people assume whatever they want, until it matters. And for those 2 clowns, it definitely mattered. The sheriff told us both the charges would be serious. Brandishing a weapon, impersonating law enforcement, trespassing, and unlawful use of force. Not to mention conspiracy, since the HOA board knowingly sent them out to patrol without the proper credentials or legal clearance. He said, they messed with the wrong family. We didn't disagree. But what really got my attention was what happened next. Because while those 2 security wannabes were getting booked, the HOA board started panicking behind the scenes. And we were about to find out just how deep their little scheme really went. It didn't take long before the HOA started scrambling like ants under a boot. The very next morning, we got a letter on our doorstep. No stamp. No envelope. Just folded paper shoved under the welcome mat like some passive-aggressive peace offering. It read, "We regret the unfortunate incident and are reviewing our internal procedures." No apology. No responsibility. Just vague corporate speak. But what caught my eye wasn't the tone, it was the signature at the bottom. The HOA president. The same man who had smirked at us during the last neighborhood meeting when we questioned their patrol initiative. The same one who, weeks earlier, had shrugged off residents' concerns about safety, saying everything was under control. Turns out, everything was not under control. Not even close. By that afternoon, I started getting calls from neighbors I barely knew. One guy, Ben from 2 houses over, said his wife was shaken. Their teenage son had also been approached by those same fake security guards a few days earlier, asked to explain where he was going just for walking home from school with his hoodie up. Another woman, Cheryl, said she had complained twice about the guard's behavior and was ignored both times. But now that someone had actually gotten hurt, or nearly hurt, they were starting to talk. I didn't say much to them. Just listened. My wife kept quiet too. She's not the kind to seek revenge, but I could tell something in her had shifted. Not fear. Not anger. Just a silent decision to not let this slide. A few days later, we got a knock on the door. It was Marcus, a younger guy who lived near the cul-de-sac. He looked nervous, holding a stack of papers under his arm. Said he was calling an emergency HOA meeting and wanted us to attend. They've been hiding stuff, he said. The board, there's more going on than just this patrol mess. That got my attention. We showed up to that meeting a few nights later. Fold-out chairs, plastic water bottles, and a folding table at the front where the board usually sat like kings. But this time, the atmosphere was different. People were talking. Loudly. And not politely anymore. The president looked flustered, red in the face, tapping a pen against his notes like he was trying to block out the noise. But he couldn't ignore what came next. Marcus stood up and laid it all out. Turns out the board had used HOA funds, asterisk homeowners dues asterisk, to hire that so-called security team. No vote. No notices. No license verification. They had quietly approved a neighborhood enforcement contract through a shell company owned by the president's cousin. It wasn't just bad judgment, it was fraud. Every neighbor in that room sat in stunned silence. Then the shouting began. People wanted answers. Why were armed men allowed to confront residents without police oversight? Why was there no insurance coverage? Who else had been harassed? That's when my wife stood up. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't yell. She just told them exactly what happened that day. Word for word. She explained how one man had drawn a weapon on her in broad daylight. How the board's negligence had nearly turned a quiet driveway into a tragedy. And how, had she not been trained to respond under pressure, she might not be standing there at all. You could hear a pin drop. Even the president didn't try to interrupt her. When she was done, she didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't need to. The silence said it all. Neighbors who had barely said hello before were now looking at us differently, not just as the quiet couple at the edge of the neighborhood, but as the ones who finally exposed what had been hiding in plain sight. By the end of the night, a motion was put on the table. Immediate suspension of the board pending investigation. Appointment of an interim committee to review financial records and security practices. Hands went up all around us. It passed. The president stormed out without a word. But I had a feeling it wasn't the last we'd hear from him. Because men like that don't give up control quietly. And sure enough, what he did next took this whole thing from shady to straight up dangerous. 3 nights later, I caught the flicker of headlights through the trees at nearly 2 a.m. Now, we live off the main stretch, a little down the gravel path where no one just ends up by accident. At that hour, it was either a lost delivery driver, or something worse. I stepped out onto the porch quietly. Didn't turn on the lights, didn't make a sound. Just watched. A black SUV. Windows tinted. Same model the HOA, security, had been using before. Except this one didn't have the decals anymore. It slowed down near the front gate, paused for a second like the driver wasn't sure whether to stop or keep going. Then it turned around and crawled off, tires crunching slow on gravel. I didn't chase it. Didn't yell. I just memorized the plate and went back inside. My wife was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her tablet open, checking local alerts and incident reports. She didn't even look surprised when I told her what I saw. Just gave a small nod and said, "He's testing the waters." She was right. That same day, we found a notice pinned to our mailbox. Not delivered by USPS, just jammed in there by hand. A single typed page with some vague legal jargon about unauthorized residents threatening community harmony and pending action by legal counsel. No name. No letterhead. No signature. It was a threat, plain and simple. But threats don't work on people like her. All it did was light a match. She made 2 phone calls. One to the sheriff's office. One to a federal contact she hadn't spoken to in months. She didn't go into details with me, but I know that voice she uses. Quiet. Sure. Focused. Next thing I knew, a detective from the county showed up to ask questions. Then someone from the Department of Consumer Affairs called me to follow up on a report about misuse of HOA funds and impersonation of a licensed agency. The board may have been suspended, but their president wasn't done causing problems. He was trying to flex what little power he had left. Sending notes. Making drive-bys. Whispering lies to neighbors who still didn't understand what had happened. Spinning the story to paint us as aggressive, unstable, and dangerous. It might have worked if people hadn't seen the truth with their own eyes. Ben from next door dropped off a batch of documents he got from a friend who used to sit on the finance committee. Turns out, the security contracts weren't the only thing shady. The HOA president had been funneling money into all sorts of side deals, tree trimming services that were never done, fake repairs, inflated landscaping bills. When we took that to the interim board, jaws hit the floor. The numbers weren't just bad, they were criminal. While all this unfolded, my wife stayed quiet, focused. She trained at dawn like always, ran her miles, cooked her eggs, cleaned her rifle. That's just who she is. She doesn't posture. She prepares. And it's a good thing, because a week later, the former HOA president made his biggest mistake yet. He filed a restraining order against her, claimed he was in fear for his safety, said she had threatened him with military-grade intimidation and violent intent, tried to paint her as some rogue operator, completely twisting what had happened. But that was the move that undid everything for him. See, when you file legal documents like that, you open the door to discovery. You're inviting investigators to look deeper, to ask questions, to verify details. And the moment they did, his story fell apart. He had no proof, no witnesses, just a wild claim made by a man with something to hide and everything to lose. He even tried to say she had threatened him with classified tactics. That was his exact wording. That line alone told the judge everything he needed to know. The restraining order was tossed out immediately. But the damage he did to himself? That was permanent. Now the county was looking closer. A real investigation. Subpoenas. Audits. Testimonies. And us? We didn't back down. Because now, this wasn't just about harassment. This was about exposing a man who had used fear to control an entire community, until he finally pointed it at the wrong woman. The official investigation into the HOA board began 2 weeks after that restraining order stunt fell apart. And once the county started digging, things unraveled faster than even I expected. First came the subpoenas. Every financial record, email, and security agreement tied to the HOA president was requested by the district attorney's office. The man who once strutted around acting like king of the neighborhood suddenly wasn't returning calls. Neighbors said they hadn't seen him in days. His shutters stayed closed. His car didn't move. It was like he had gone underground. Then came the interviews. People we barely knew, folks who used to look right through us, started knocking on our door. Not to gossip, not to argue. To confess. One woman said she was told by the old board that my wife was a foreign military contractor, squatting illegally. Another neighbor, an older man, said he had been warned to avoid the lady with the aggressive dog training, even though we didn't own a single pet. They were feeding the community lies. Smearing her name behind closed doors, hoping no one would ask questions. But now, questions were being asked everywhere. Turns out, the board had been controlling more than just lawn care and mailbox paint colors. They'd built a shadow rulebook. Secret fines, unapproved surveillance, anonymous complaints that were really just board members trying to punish anyone who didn't fall in line. And for the first time, people were realizing it. It wasn't long before a local reporter picked up the story. They didn't run names, yet, but the headline alone was enough. Veteran family targeted by rogue HOA, county launches criminal probe. That was the day things flipped completely. See, when you're dealing with a bully, they rely on silence. On fear. On the idea that no one will speak up. But once one person stands up, and the truth comes out, others start standing too. People who were afraid of retaliation now started filing their own complaints. Overcharged fees. Phantom violations. Threatening letters. All of it started surfacing. What was once a small HOA dispute had turned into a full-blown scandal. And through it all, my wife never raised her voice. Never told anyone what to do. She didn't need to. The truth was doing all the heavy lifting. Meanwhile, the interim board kept asking us to get more involved. Said we had the trust of the community now. That my wife especially had become a symbol of quiet strength. But we weren't looking to take power. We just wanted safety, respect, accountability. Still, we agreed to advise them. My wife helped review their new neighborhood safety protocols. Everything from how patrols could be operated legally to proper training requirements, even how complaints should be processed. She didn't just shut things down, she helped rebuild it better. And here's where it got interesting. During one of the review sessions, one of the new board members asked about the original security contract. Wanted to know who actually signed off on the hiring of the unlicensed guards. We looked at the forms together. It wasn't just the president. 3 other board members had also signed, including the treasurer, who had quietly resigned right after the incident. A few days later, it was revealed that the security company, if you could even call it that, had been paid in cash. Large withdrawals made from the HOA reserve fund. No receipts. No IRS filings. Just shady checks and scribbled notes. That's when the DA stepped in again. Fraud charges. Misappropriation of funds. Criminal negligence. This wasn't a community drama anymore. This was a criminal case. And the best part? The community stood with us. Not because we asked them to. Not because we marched around demanding respect. But because we told the truth and stood our ground when it counted most. And even then, I thought things had finally calmed down. But I was wrong. Because just when we thought the old board had been stripped of all their power, we learned they'd been working on a backup plan the entire time, one final, desperate attempt to take back control. The thing about desperate people is they never quit clean. Right when the whole community thought the scandal was winding down, the former HOA president made one last move, and it wasn't subtle. Late one night, just past midnight, we got an alert from our driveway camera. Motion detected. I checked the feed expecting maybe a raccoon or a neighbor's cat. But no, it was him, the former president, standing right at the edge of our driveway, hands in his pockets, looking straight into the lens. He didn't ring the bell, didn't knock, just stood there for a few minutes, staring, then turned and walked off. I didn't go outside. My wife didn't either. She was already watching from the upstairs window. Focused. Not surprised at all. She said, "He's testing the line again." And she was right. The next morning, several houses in the neighborhood found flyers on their porches. Printed on cheap paper, no official logo, no return address. The message was plain. We must take our community back. These outsiders are destroying the balance. The HOA was built for order. It's time to restore it. It was obvious who had written it. But this time, no one stayed silent. Within hours, our phones lit up. Texts, emails, even knocks on the door. Neighbors who used to stay out of everything were now furious. They knew exactly what this was, an attempt to start something new behind the scenes. A splinter group. Another power grab. And it wasn't just talk. A few days later, someone tried to file paperwork with the county under a new name, Neighborhood Restoration Committee. The listed address? The former treasurer's. Same woman who had signed off on the fake security payments. Turns out she never left town, just waited for the dust to settle. They were trying to form a shadow HOA. No elections. No accountability. Just another layer of rules written by people who had already broken every one of them. But here's the thing, they underestimated how much had changed. This wasn't the same neighborhood anymore. At the next community meeting, it was standing room only. Residents who had never shown up before packed the room. Everyone had heard about the flyers. Everyone knew about the new filing. And this time, they were angry for the right reasons. One by one, people stood up and spoke. Not just about what happened to us, but about years of fear. Years of silence. All the quiet punishments and petty fines. The way the old board ruled with whispers and threats. And then someone asked my wife to speak again. She stood slowly, walked to the front, and didn't say much. Just a few clear sentences. She said, "I didn't move here to lead anything. I came to be left alone." But when people cross a line, you don't let them keep walking. You stand still, hold your ground, and let them know the line is real. That was it. And that was enough. By the end of the meeting, the interim board had passed a motion to block the formation of any new committees not approved by a full resident vote. They also voted to permanently ban the former board members from holding any position of authority within the HOA or any related group. Not for a year. Not until tempers cooled. Permanently. And still, the ex-president tried to fight it. Filed appeals. Sent legal threats. Started rumors. He claimed we were turning the neighborhood into a dictatorship. He called my wife militant. He said I was using the media to smear him. But every time he spoke, more truth came out. More documents. More screenshots. More people brave enough to step forward. What had started as a fake security patrol pulling a weapon on my wife had become something else entirely. It had become a reckoning. And through it all, we didn't have to shout. We didn't have to threaten. We just stood firm, while everything built on lies began to collapse.